Y'all ever have regrets? I have regrets, like that one time when I made a flip note version of myself and got stabbed. I don't like talking about it. Or that one time when I ate a pufferfish, that I learned my lesson. Probably not. I survived. And I'm sure you have regrets. Yes, you. I know what you did. Well, do you want to know who also has regrets? A multi-billion-dollar children's company that I give all my money to. You know, I should really start evaluating my life decisions and start making some changes.
So, what seems to be the problem?
Luigi.
Get the out.
Nintendo. You know Nintendo. The company that made Donkey Kong.
Okay.
I can't think of anything else.
Nintendo is at the top of the food chain in terms of video game consoles. Wow, what a thing to brag about. For a good while, until they weren't. Once other companies realized they could make actual money by making games, a ton of competition arose for Nintendo. I mean, sure, there was your less successful Bubsies, which, like, good luck selling a game with this guy in it, what is this? But then you had your super successful mega success like Sonic the Hedgehog, which had Nintendo metaphorically literally pissing their pants. Currently, one of Nintendo's biggest competitors is Sony with their PlayStation. While the console wars aren't as cutthroat as they were just 20 years ago, you can tell how much PlayStation pisses Nintendo off still. Like, yeah, I would too pump out a Kirby game every year for a while if I had the PlayStation Vita to compete with.
Is this a police station or a kindergarten?
You may ask, well, what about Xbox? They're competition for Nintendo and Sony, right? Well, yeah, but Microsoft just kind of wants to be a part of the fun and doesn't actually want to do anything to compete. It's a wild world we live in. Making fun of Xbox is like making fun of politics. It's just a bunch of old men wearing diapers. You ever been in the Halo lobby? One of the reasons there's such a rivalry between Sony and Nintendo is because the only reason why a PlayStation even exists is because of the consequences of Nintendo's own greed. In 1988, Sony was developing an add-on for the upcoming Super Nintendo that would be both compatible with CDs and cartridges, and Nintendo took a very clear interest in this Frankenstein of a machine. This thing was going to be dubbed the PlayStation, although for simplicity it's been dubbed the Nintendo PlayStation, hence why I call it a Frankenstein of a machine. How do I mix these two? During the development of the Nintendo PlayStation, Sony ended up attempting to license all CDs to themselves, meaning Nintendo would have to go through them to release their games, and they'd have to pay a manufacturing and tax fee. In layman's terms, a mega corporation would make less money, meaning that can't slide. And after some research and business mumbo-jumbo, Nintendo basically realized that Sony is going to essentially steal all profits from the system and Nintendo would make next to nothing. Again, mega corporations making less money cannot slide, they stopped working together. And from that, Sony ended up deciding that it was a better idea to just create their own console and not deal with anyone else besides themselves, creating the PlayStation in 1995, arguably Nintendo's biggest rival. Hey Nintendo, was the money you saved by not working with Sony in the late 80s worth it in the long run? Was it? Hey guys, was it? However, Nintendo was still interested in making games using CD-based technology. Does that mean they would make their next system a CD-based console like its competition, the PlayStation and Sega Saturn? No. Nintendo partnered up with the electronic company Philips to license out some of their games to this new sort of console Philips had named the Philips CDI. Emphasis on sort of. And with this, Nintendo released a few games from the Mario and Zelda series onto this console, and they're revered as some of the best and most influential games in their series. Just kidding, they're looked at as some of the worst and nothing more than a joke, and Nintendo has done everything in their power to make you forget these existed. But me, I will never let them forget, so let's talk about these games. The first Nintendo games that were released on the Philips CDI were from the Zelda series, and wasn't just one game, but a dual release, meaning two partnering games released on the exact same day. Double the fun, right? Right? Firstly, we got Link: The Faces of Evil. Game just starts. Link asks you if you want to fight the forces of evil, like the title. That's it, start the game. This game takes a very different gameplay approach to pretty much any other Zelda game. You see, most other Zelda games are top-down adventure games focused on combat, strategy, and puzzle solving, while Link: The Faces of Evil takes a much more simple approach to its gameplay, instead being pretty much a platformer, and not a good one. But let's not judge so quickly here.
Oh, goody! Mashed Link for the main course!
Let's judge so quickly here. This game fucking sucks. You have a sword and a shield which work as your attack and defense against enemies, which you would think having a sword and a shield would work fine in a simple 2D platformer? No! Using your sword feels incredibly janky and like you have almost no control over it, and enemies have no reaction to it whatsoever. This means that you have almost no idea when you actually hit an enemy because it won't react to it or go back at all. And considering this game's magic hitboxes, which have no other goal in this world besides f***ing you over, since the enemies don't bounce back whatsoever, there's nothing stopping the enemies from just hitting you immediately once you hit it unless you have the reaction time akin to a god. Oh yeah, and you also have next to no invincibility frames when you get hit, meaning you can get hit over and over again and die. Very easily. I think the level design is overall passable and not egregious, but considering this game's jank with enemy placement and unfair everything, having decent level design changes nothing. One issue with the gameplay is how the game graphics are done. It can be incredibly hard to figure out what's part of the foreground and the background. Like, look at this. It's easier to tell dog shit apart. I also find the controls just don't work for a game like this. You have very little buttons at your grasp, so many actions have to be set to a weird combination of buttons. Like to open up the menus, you need to be crouching. That's annoying as hell. I have nothing else to say. Who designed this? Also, the button to jump is up on the D-pad. Not good, bad idea, bullshit. Other words to say, not good idea. Things like the bosses are also pretty bad due to this game's lack of working combat. So to deal with them, you have to deal with the game's jank on top of having an annoying as hell boss. But say you're tired of the bullfuckery of these bosses. Well, you can buy items in the shop with rubies, not rupees like they're called in every other Zelda game. I actually have no idea if this was a mistake on the development team or Nintendo said no for whatever reason. Like, yeah, you guys can make a game with our beloved characters and make them act like this, but using rupees is a step too far. You get rubies by killing enemies scattered around the levels if you can somehow find a way to get used to the controls. The controls suck. What's nice about this is that you can easily farm for rubies and get whatever you want just by going back and forth over and over in a level just because this game endlessly respawns enemies. Oh yeah, by the way, besides being able to farm for rubies from the enemies, having endlessly respawning enemies in these levels is really annoying. I think that goes without saying. The shop owner is a new character who goes by the name of Morshu, who, let it be known, is a funny guy. He, being the shop owner, sells you items you can buy with your rubies, and he would normally be useless to talk about if he wasn't so damn funny. You go to his shop and he asks you what to buy, and I think the way he says bombs is way too funny, and I die laughing, figuratively, anytime I hear him talk.
Lamp oil, rope, bombs, 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 bomb.
Motherfuck! Overall, this game is interesting, to say it in the kindest way. It's not good, I think that goes without saying. I see no reason for any sane person to even consider touching this game, but I don't know, this game just kind of has a funny charm. I can't help but say, I kind of like it. The funny charm of the game, that is, the game itself can go die on the street for all I care. But say you really like this game, like you really, really like this game, and you can't fathom the idea of not having more of it. Well, like I said earlier, this game is released day to day with a sister game to it, this game being Zelda the Wand of Gamelon. Thank God.
Yes! Yes! Whoa!
Zelda the Wand of Gamelon is incredibly similar to Link the Faces of Evil, having the same gameplay, items, and reusing many of the same sprites, etc. What's different about this game is that instead of playing as a titular character Link, you instead play as Zelda. It has the exact same gameplay though, besides the visual difference. A different stroke for a different folk, these games are incredibly similar and they both suck. What I found weird about this game is that compared to Link the Faces of Evil, this game has a bunch more grinding you have to do, which is just not fun. These games are incredibly janky. This game also does the exact same thing as the other game, and it just kind of starts you in the main conflict, which I find very funny. It doesn't start in any sort of medias res, no central conflict, just want to do this is happening, cool, let's go. I mean, in a way, you gotta appreciate it. The game respects your time. No, it doesn't. This game has endless grinding, and it fucking sucks. This game also doesn't have Morshu as a shopkeeper. Instead, the shopkeeper is this dude named the Merchant. Man, who names their kid that? I would also say that this game's a little better than Link the Faces of Evil, but that isn't saying much. It's like comparing your dog shit to your friend's dog shit. It's still dog shit at the end of the day. Although my heart does say Link the Faces of Evil is significantly better only for the addition of Morshu. God bless his soul.
Bombs?
These games are incredibly iconic, well, not for their gameplay, and definitely not their quality, but they're iconic for their cutscenes, and not for their quality. During these games' development, they had a very, very small budget, only having around $600,000 to develop both of these games, which for video games maybe gets you a few colored pixels on your screen. So they had to outsource the animation for these two games to a Russian company, which, due to the Soviet Union disbanding around this time, meaning there's no longer any government funding going towards animation companies, meaning they were essentially left to beg for rations for contract work. But then comes the hero Philips, contracting them to animate shitty, goofy Zelda games for their failing console, but I'm sure the unnamed Russian company very much appreciated the 12 pesos they were given. Honestly, the animation in these games isn't even that bad. Like, it's not good, but For the 90s animation done on a huge budget, these cutscenes could have been much, much worse. But even with that minimal amount of praise I just gave it, the animation in these games it's goofy as hell. Just look at it. I'm sure Nintendo saw this and looked in horror. These games' cutscenes were often used in niche internet videos dubbed YouTube poops. You really didn't have to name your genre of internet videos off of feces, but okay. These videos are basically just random pieces of media edited to hell and back with random loud and unintelligible edits thrown in. Basically, they're the precursor to what is now called a schizopost, something I am well versed in myself.
Then, after you've scrubbed all of me, then, after you've rubbed oil on my penis, then you can rub my dick, then you can eat.
The cutscenes were used in a manner that nobody on the development team intended for, but I think that adds to the beauty in these. In some way. These videos are called YouTube poops. I think that severely limits the amount of beauty you can have, but it's there, deep down. The next game released for the Philips CDI was the elusive, the great, hang on, let me open thesaurus.com. The fantastic, it's Hotel Mario, I don't need to do all that. This game sucks. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Hotel Mario has you play as Mario, crazy, I know, and you must save the princess by exploring through the Mushroom Kingdom's 7 hotels. Explains the name. Each hotel room has you visit a new level, and the levels are not that good. They're single-screen puzzle levels where Mario has to step on enemies to make sure the floor doesn't fall on you, resulting in your death. How many OSHA violations do these hotels break? God. Hotel Mario is an awful game only made because Philips weaseled their way to get their rights to have Mario on their console, but this game, sucks. Really sucks. The levels have next to no variation, the puzzles are stupid, and who the f*** would want to buy a game called Hotel Mario? Just to give you an idea, this game came out over 4 years after the release of Mario World. Why the hell would I pick Hotel Mario over Mario World? I can think of a few reasons. There were also 2 other Mario games planned for the CDI, and only God knows why they were cancelled. First we got Mario Takes America, which may be one of the greatest titles ever conceived in gaming history, but avast, it never came to fruition. From what I could figure out online, this game had Mario arriving in New York City and heading to Hollywood, California for its very own movie, which I guess he eventually made it. It also said that Mario would drive vehicles like trucks, trains, cars, planes, and helicopters to make it to Hollywood, which sounds very goofy. Honestly, the concept of this game is very interesting to me, having a Mario Kart game based off of America could be very cool. But using the other Nintendo CDI games as a reference, pretty sure this game would have sucked big time, so I'm not mourning any loss here. Besides the title. And the next cancelled game here is Super Mario's Wacky World, which I will say again, great title, sad it got wasted. There is almost no information about this game, most likely because it was never put into production whatsoever, only announced to say, look, we have a Mario game on here, buy it, please. Didn't work. It was supposedly going to be a successor to Mario World, which could have been cool, but again, look at the other Nintendo CDI games. This game would have had Mario speaking in a goofy American accent and you know it. Foreshadowing.
It's me, a Mario.
The last Nintendo game ever released for the Philips CDI was Zelda's Adventure. This game sets itself apart from the first 2 Zelda games on the Philips CDI by having a much more similar gameplay style to the original Zelda games. It's a top-down adventure game. It goes for a hyper-realistic pixel art style similar to what a game like Mortal Kombat did, and I will say, for how limited the Philips CDI was in many ways, this game actually looks pretty good for a console that looks like this. The gameplay, on the other hand, is very janky. Who would have guessed? You move weirdly and it almost feels like there's a delay in your movement. I can't quite explain it, but are you really surprised that a game that looks like this doesn't play well? Look at it. The game itself isn't anything special, pretty basic, pretty bad, etc. But I think what I find most interesting about this game is its cutscenes. Just look at them. I feel like I've seen this shit in a nightmare. So with the original CDI Zelda games only having a budget of around $600,000, which is already low, imagine what they could do with only half the budget on a much more ambitious game. Well, they obviously couldn't contract the animation out, so they went for the cheapest possible option, not doing any animation at all. They instead opted to do live-action cutscenes, but again, since they had a budget smaller than insert funny joke here, they had office employees be actors instead of professional actors. I find these cutscenes actually way too funny for my own good. I find the idea of random office employees whose jobs mainly relied on game development being forced in front of a camera to act and having not always the best line delivery, among other things, very funny. That sounds like the plot of an episode of a TV show, but real. Soon after this game was released, the CDI was cancelled because, well, no duh, the game fucking sucked, of course it failed. All of these Nintendo Philips games fucking sucked. Sure, they have redeemable aspects like being goofy as hell, but you cannot reasonably tell me anyone genuinely likes Hotel Mario as a game. I think the whole Philips CDI situation is one of the reasons why Nintendo is so overprotective of their characters now. They don't want them ever being turned into this shit again. But honestly, I think it's kind of nice to look back at a time where Nintendo was significantly less protective of their IPs and they weren't so sanitized like they are today. A time where Link could say, oh boy, smooching time in a game. I think I need to go to therapy. Again.
So, what seems to be the problem, again?
Don't have that attitude with me. You're my therapist. You should understand my trauma. Like, do you know how many shitty games I've played? Too many!
Have you considered reading a book, going outside, getting a job?
No, I talk about Donkey Kong to a fictional audience in my head.
Does it help?
No.